Hey, how you doing? Let's start into Jeremy Silman now. Let's see where we are. Okay. This is Magnus Carlsen versus John Nunn. So we will do this thing. Let's go to our studies. Appreciate your patience. Got a band-aid on one of my fingers and it's slowing me down just a little bit. So I usually can get it going faster. I want to make sure I have the right spelling. There we go. So Magnus Carlsen is actually white and John Nunn is black. Okay, let's do it. E4, C5. I think this is a Sicilian if I'm not mistaken. F3. Yep. D6. D4. Knight F6. Knight C3. This is an anti-bishop takes D4 move. C takes D. And so this is, see, if you were to take, you actually take here. But if you were to take here, then you have the knight. And you kind of go into a odd variation of something like this. And you're kind of in a problem at that point. So you don't want to do that. That's why they take with the knight. A6, this stops the infiltration of any of these knights. Bishop B3, but that's not a problem because we're trying to develop anyways. E5, this attacks our knight. The knight retreats back. Because at the present moment, this is the most active spot for the knight. If the knight were to go here, of course, you see that it traps in the light square bishop, which is not good. And knights that are like this aren't very flexible. So that's why knight f3 was played. White tends to fight for the d5 square. D5 is right here. And so the way to also do that is you now can potentially play knight in there. You could potentially play bishop here, knight in, and then if the knight takes, bishop takes, and you kind of get an outpost. One of your pieces is going to fly in there. D5 with bishop c4, and looking to help him do that also is you're going to have bishop e6. And bishop e6 could develop a piece and stop bishop f4 in its tracks. And it also runs into, though, knight to g5, which is attacked. So what they're saying is that he played this move here. But if this were played to stop the bishop from coming here, it gets hit with a bolt lightning bolt, as I like to call it, knight to g5. And if we can trade off the light squared bishop, this is actually really good for us because the majority of the pawns are on dark squares. And so let's say like bishop here, knight takes, pawn takes, and then the bishop could actually potentially come here, king castles, and this is not very good. This makes this bishop really bad. The dark square bishop is bad, but there is d5 that could be played here, which we would then trade off, and then he'd have a majority. But they're called isolated doubled pawn. No, they're not double pawns. Oh, they're called hanging isolated pawns. Because if this were played here, you have these are called hanging isolated pawns, isolanes, hanging isolanes, because it's in the center. That's why it's called that. So that's why that was played. Bishop is to avoid that, and get black was the castle, and then play this move here. See, what black was to do is castle and then play h6 and stop the knight from coming in. The bishop then can come here to stop this bishop here. That's kind of the idea. Bishop c4, castles, and both sides castle. Oh, he plays bishop e6 right away. Okay, well that makes sense because he's challenging the bishop right away. Because this would actually be a waste of a move. This probably would be a dubious move at this point because the bishop's already come out to c4. So there's really no point to that. This would be dubious. Let's see, bishop there. Okay, bishop b3. And so Magnus does bishop e3. This is an interesting move sequence because what he's trying to do is keep the tension, and if the bishop, white doesn't want to take on e6 since f takes gives him firm protection of both. See, if white were to take here, black would take back with the pawn, and thus protecting these 2 points here. And these 2 points would be protected at that point if the bishop were to take. I'll show you. So if you take here, you take here. Now black's got firm control over f5 and d5, and Magnus didn't want that to happen. And then even if black were to trade here, Magnus can take back with a takes b. And then this would allow the rook to basically have a rook swinger coming in and over. It's not a bad move. It's actually really good. Knight c3 or c6. Bishop e2. Knight a5. Rook f d1. Knight takes. Oh, he takes towards center. This clears the c file for white's knight to maneuver into. Okay, knight. So this is what they're talking about. Here, 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 and then finally there. Queen e8. Knight c. Hold on. Knight e1. And d5 is on the menu. That's what he says. h6. Knight c2. Bishop d4. Knight b4. White's opening strategy from move 7 on his decision to acquire his knight to give d5. Get to d5 position. Carlsen now has a slight plus, but black's 2 bishop promise him adequate chances as well. So rook fc1, f3 to protect the pawn because white wants to jump in. This also stops the knight coming here. Bishop d8, rook d3. This pawn is really good stopping. It stops that from happening. a5. So bd5. So now the knight is kind of, black pushes white to play knight to b4. Knight takes, then a4. B takes a, rook takes a, and then b3. Rook a6, rook a to d1. Rook a5. This is a double question mark blunder. Moving that piece twice. I think why Jeremy Silman and the game gave this a double question mark blunder. They should have back here, instead of going a6, he probably should have played rook a5 right away. Why do rook a6 and then rook a5? Just play rook a5 if that's what you're thinking. But this here, a5, and I think now is probably a move such as f5 is actually strong as well, and a move like bishop to a5 is also a strong move, but not that move. Knight b6, knight takes, bishop takes, rook a6, rook takes d. That's why it was a blunder. Makes sense now, because it gives up the protection of this pawn. This move's a blunder right here because of it gives away protection of that pawn. And Magnus eyes that, takes full scope on it. White went on to win. We're going to see how white went on to win, since now they're down a pawn. Queen b. This is going for another pawn right here on e5. Bishop g5. It's trying to set up for a mating threat right there. a4, h5, a5, h4, b4, a8. Just retreating the knight back, rook back. Queen d, trading off. Queen takes, rook takes, and rook c4 to try to win the pawn back. Bishop c5, that protects the pawn and traps the rook actually now. Rook c8, rook b5 or b6, rook c. Now black's in full reactive chess. Now the king's starting to come in. King comes in that way. So both kings are flooding in. Bishop d6. This is gonna basically pick up a pawn here, but because of this fork, rook d8. But black's able to use a pin, so king e, f6. Bishop takes there. The reason this doesn't work is you could potentially win that back. Or you actually probably would want to win there, do that. And if that's played, then here, here, and here. And Madness has, let's see, 5 versus 3, 2 pawns up. Rook takes. E6. Rook takes D. King takes. Rook takes B. Rook takes. Rook B. King C3. Takes B2, G2. H8, King G, Rook takes H4, Rook A2, and then King B4. And White was successful in this game, but Black's pluses never had a chance to show their stuff. A small wonder then that all this was repeated a couple months later as well. Magnus Carlsen played Karyakin in 2006, so this is a really older game, really old, a 14-year-old game. This is a young Magnus. See. Perfect. How are we doing on time? Let me get our position up here and we'll see. Okay, let's see how long this game is. Beautiful. We might be able to do one. We might be able to do this game and another we may be able to. Well, I'll see, because I want to see about that. Perfect. Let's do it to it. I appreciate your patience while I was checking that out. Just want to make sure that the notes were correct. You always want to be 100%. D6. This is the Sicilian defense. I noticed that a lot of players in that era of like 2006, 2005, I think they still play this because it's a pretty solid and oops, let me see, solid dynamic opening. I want to make sure did I do that right? Number 3. Yep. But then knight F6. Interesting. He plays knight c3. This is a anti-bishop takes d4 move order. There's also, if you wanted to go into a queenless endgame, which kind of this goes more towards you're going into a quick endgame. This is the way to do it. This ensures black can't castle anymore, but the queens are off the board, so the necessity to castle is not too dangerous of a position. If this were acquired the king moving with a queen on the board, queens on the board, then black would be very worried here. And so Magnus wants to keep, because he's white, Magnus wants to keep his options open for his queen and to take advantage of this weak long diagonal of the a4 to e8 diagonal. That's what Magnus wants. And to get the queen involved and to get the pieces in. So c takes d, knight takes, and then a6. That stops this in its tracks, a6. I noticed that that's kind of a standard move that's played, and Karyakin would have been happy with a draw in this position facing Magnus. So bishop e3. This is kind of a standard idea where white has acceleration in their development at the cost of the pawn. It's equal material, but black has 2 pawns in the center and more chance of central control, but white has a majority on the queen side, so give and take. e5 here, knight f3. Kind of a very similar, this is a very similar move sequence. The idea is to fight for d5 in this line. First of all, you'd have to get a bishop either to d3 and our bishop to c. We have to remember that bishop c4 is in the works to control d5. Knight f3. f3, we got that. Bishop e7, same type of setup. Bishop c4, exactly the same move order. Castles, same move order, almost to the T. I believe it is the same. And then here, bishop e3. So Magnus knows this from his game versus John Nunn. So he probably just whipped these out. Boom, 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 boom. Knight c3 or c6. Queen there. Same move order. It's incredible. Here, rook fd1. Wow, this is like a spitting image. Queen takes, and c takes. Queen e8. Wow, this is incredible. Exactly the same. And the same idea is in place to come here to dominate d5. We've been here before, but this time Karyakin stands up for black's 2 bishop and dynamic position, as is a typical and high-class opening battle. They ultimately boil down to a psychology difference of opinions. It's not that John Nunn was, any less than Karyakin or Karyakin was any better than John Nunn. It was just Karyakin was able to make his 2 bishops stand out, and he played more active. So you have to remember, even you, my Team Chess Cruncher, can play like this. It's not rating driven. It's knowledge driven. And if you have the ability, you have this, like we talked about always with Bruce Lee, you can play like this as well. It's just you have to be able to see these type of move sequences and get an understanding of the imbalances. Knight g4. Exclam. This was a really good move for Karyakin. He's trying to basically trade the knight off for the bishop and then play queen takes, and then he'll have the 2 bishops, and the idea will be to open up the center and allow his bishops to reign supreme. Far more dynamic than the h6 variation that John Nunn played. Knight to c3. So he's not minding. Magnus is going along with his plan. Sometimes in chess, my friends, you have to actually give something to get something. Magnus is saying to himself, do you know what? I know that Karyak is more likely going to take my bishop, have the two bishops, but I want to have an active. I want to have my knights to their most active activity when that happens. And so he's 2 moves away from implanting a knight here. He's 1 move, 2 moves, 2 moves away. So sometimes, I know it sounds crazy, but you have to turn a blind eye to that type of a position. It's really weird. I don't know why it is, but that's just how it is. And it's kind of, you have to train yourself to not get concerned about your opponent having the imbalance of the 2 bishops versus 2 knights, because Anon loves knights, so he would more than happily give up the bishop for the knight and then dominate the position. It's all about flavor. Then now this is a vital hit right there. And f3. Magnus wants to, if Karyakin takes here, takes there, Magnus wants to take back and then play knight here and then knight in there. Knight takes e, so now the move has happened. Knight f6 is also an interesting continuation. Jeremy Silman says that it was a playable idea. And then trying to say to white, okay, you can get this move in. And then I'll play queen here. And then you can get this move in. You can play here. And then I'll play here. I'll play right there. And then you play here. And then potentially, do we have enough attackers? There's 4 versus 4. We can try to double up rooks. And now we can just implant a knight in there. And then after knight takes, you got bishops, rook takes, and then you can actually play rook there. And this is kind of a different position now. It's all changed. It's kind of a little bit different. As I like to say, it's a little bit interesting. Because you can actually take here and more of a drawn position. So Magnus didn't want that to happen. Actually, Karyakin probably should have went into that line. That's what I'm saying. He should have actually retreated back rather than taking. But he wanted a dynamic position where he has chances, and this is a way to do that. Oh wow, I was wrong. It wasn't. It was knight takes. Oh, nice. That's actually a nice idea. Rather than the queen, it voids. Oh, that is nice. That's really nice. This looks lovely, but it leaves the road clear for Black's d-pawn to eventually advance. More conceptual. F takes here, knight takes, F takes, and then knight takes here. So this is what Jeremy Sim was saying, that this is more in line with Magnus's idea of allowing the knight to come in there. But I'm kind of seeing what the idea is, queen here, and then he wants to actually play bishop to b4 and cause some headaches. But then you can actually just implant the knight in there and still get the same potential idea of this knight. Rather than the e knight going in there, the c knight could actually implant in there. And then this would be interesting because you could play here. Wow, this is a crazy position. you could take there. So you can't really play F yet. So maybe he'd have to protect. Well, could he actually protect there? Ouch. Yeah, this is a tough one. You have to be careful. This bishop is not being protected, so you might have to play rook there first. Knight in here. Queen. Nope, can't move that yet. You might even just take, allow the pawns there, and the knight come in. And I don't know if it's better or not, but this allows, like what Jeremy Soman's saying, this allows Karyakin to push his pawn, which you don't ever want that to come to fruition. This is an idea. When black's bishops are beginning to emerge, actually we don't want to do that. Very strong for Karyakin, so. Rook d8. Knight to d5. Queen f7. Queen b3. Bishop takes. Queen takes. Queen takes. Rook takes. And he's going to try to... the king's going to try to come over and defend. Rook a d1. King e6. If we assert this position by what looks good, one would think that white is doing extremely well here. After all, his knight rules e4. His rooks are joining their brother in attacking d6. But if you take a look at the imbalances, you might begin to come up with a different conclusion. White's doubled queenside pawns leave him a half pawn down. So if you want to think about it, he's a half pawn down. At least until he can undouble his pawns with d4, b4, and then b5. White's rook looks great, but they are stuck on the d file. If the d rook leaves the d file, then d5 will hang. Oh, I appreciate. Thank you for your patience on that. I mean, if the d1 rook moves, the d5 rook hangs. So that's what I mean, not the push on the d5. It might also allow black to get central play with d6 to d5 if the d5 rook moves. This means that the c file is open for the grab for black to grab it, and once the black rook claims it, and then it comes down to the 7th rank or 2nd rank, as we like to say, it's almost over. White's knight is a monster as long as the d pawn doesn't can't advance. But can White's rook stay in their basically present position forever? If not, the d pawn will move, and that means that once that happens, the horse will suddenly have to retreat, and knights don't ever like to retreat. They're the ones that want to charge in. Black's position is already a bit more comfortable, though white should certainly hold a draw here. b4, rook c8, b5, taking the moment a moment to he's trying to keep the rook out of C2. Rook D1 to D2, C1 check, King F2, Rook C4, threatens rook takes B. Knight takes D6, rook takes B4, rook C2. Oops, let me see. King E2, and this is actually a mistake here if you did play this way. Bishop to G5, and white suddenly is in serious trouble, so Magnus just didn't worry about the knight of rook infiltration. Rook C2, B takes A, knight takes. This is actually an interesting move here. So if you were interested in this takes, it is playable. A takes B, knight takes B, rook takes B2, and then knight C7 check, King F6, rook D5 to D2, Bishop C5 check, and then King F1, rook takes, rook takes. This is an equal position and drawing chances for black, which you'd be happy with. B takes A, rook to A5. It's surprisingly a dubious move for white. The D pawn looks weaker, but it will soon become a hero. Thus, he should have taken his final opportunity to chop it off. This is actually the best idea here, exclaim. Because rook D8, king rook takes, exclaim here. King takes is forced. Knight F7. King here. Knight takes D. Rook takes B. And then A4. Bishop C5. King H1. Rook A2. A5. Bishop B4. Knight C6. Bishop takes. Knight takes. And then rook takes. With a theoretical drawn endgame here. So he says no notation after this, so we'll complete this, and then we'll probably stop here because there's one that has a lot of notation in it, and I want to go over that one with some good theory and talks. Rook B8, B3, Bishop B6. How many of us would be tempted to take here, right? But then you have a problem. You got an outside pass pawn for white, and that's always a nice. And then this is pinned, so white's doing rather well here, rather well. That's why Karyak is like, I don't want that to happen, so just trying to hold on to it with dear life at this point. King F1, BC6, H3. Trying to get all the pawns. See what white wants to do. White would be more than happy at this present moment to get all the rooks traded off, and then go into a knight versus bishop endgame because the pawns are on the opposite color of the bishop. H5. Rook D3. Okay. G5. Rook D2. Rook takes, knight takes. Really interesting. I was just wondering why he played that. I think it was a waiting move. And D5. At last, Rook A4. A5. This is kind of a tricky move here because if let me do the move that black played, which was white played with king here. If you're thinking about taking there, you walk into a puzzle rush idea of a fork, and you lose a piece. So you can't take. Very tricky of Karyak, and you gotta love that. Bishop D6. King D3. I know you were thinking that potentially this would be a good idea. And then like if this happened, then you can kind of trade off. But this would go more towards an endgame for a drawn endgame. But if you look, black has 3 pawn islands and white has only 2, which gives white an advantage. That's why Karyak tries to keep all the pieces on the board as long as he can. King D3, Rook C1. Trying to either get a knight here, a rook there, or a rook here. These 2 points are the underbelly of white. B4. What, B4? Yeah, B4. Ah, there it is, B4. A takes, rook takes, rook G1. G4, Rook G3, Rook B8, A4 check, King E2, Rook G2 check, King F1, Rook takes D2, Rook takes D8, H takes, H takes, he takes F, and then Rook E8, check, King D6, Rook F8, Rook takes A2, It takes F5, king d6, g d4, rook f5, d4, king e1, rook e2, and white resigned here. This is what he reads here, and we're going to call it on this. An opening battle between two theories, two theoretical, basically assertions. Players ultimately it boiled down to the psychology, the difference of opinion. If you don't know the theory, imbalances, and general ideas behind your opening lines, then you're left with random moves. So if you don't, basically, that's a beautiful wrap up. Beautiful, beautiful. If you don't, and we're going to reread that really quick. Beautiful wrap up, then we'll call it on this. But if you don't know the psychology, the imbalances and general ideas, so the imbalances and the general ideas behind the opening line that you're playing, then you're going to be left with just random moves. So if you're playing just a move for move's sake, you're going to be left with like if you haven't studied the Sicilian, you haven't studied we'll say the French defense or the Caro-Kann, you're going to be on the Najdorf, and you don't have all those lines, the understanding of the lines and the imbalances, why there's traded, why all this stuff's going on. You're going to be left with with just random moves, and those random moves aren't enough. And if your opponent is like MVL's a master of the Najdorf, he loves playing the Najdorf. And so you wouldn't want to play the Najdorf against him unless you had the experience that MVL has. So you would want to play something else, maybe like a Sicilian, that if you have more experience in the Sicilian, or a Caro-Kann, or a French defense exchange variation. If you kind of don't want to go into theory, you can do the French exchange variation. White can do that. It's just all these different ideas. The theory is what you have to be looking at if you're going to be playing an opening, and the imbalances that they lead to. Okay, I wanted to thank you for all logging on and participating. You know what? We have to remember, like what Bruce Lee says, take what you know and be able to apply it and be willing to do something with it. And as always, you know what? The choice, especially in this world that we live in right now, and with the situation that's at hand affecting the whole world, we have to be ready to enter into eternity. And there's one choice that you can make to be assured that you'll have eternal life, and that's to receive the Lord Jesus, Lord, Savior of your life. Because eternity is forever, my friends, and we can't even comprehend forever. The most we can comprehend is, remember how we talked about the thimble taking it, draining all the oceans, all the rivers, and all the seas around the entire world, bringing it in and draining it. That is, eternity has began. And I'll give you another quick example. If you take an eyedropper, take all the grains of sand on all the beaches and bring it inland, eternity hasn't begun. So those are two really good examples I heard, and I was like, wow. And eternity hasn't began then. So just keep that in your forefront, that someday you're going to have to make a decision. And I pray you make the right one. And remember what we always talk about is to treasure your victories. So treasure your victories, learn from your losses, and remember that mistakes don't define who you are. It's how you handle the mistake that defines who you are. And remember, the losses are for a reason we just talked about. The two reasons: you either didn't know the imbalances and you need to work on that opening, or you played a random move that didn't apply to the position. And either way, that you need to go back to the drawing board, as I like to say, and go over it, find out how you can improve in it. And that's what the Team Chess Cruncher motto is all about, of hanging up our coats hanging up our hat, sitting down and studying when most won't. Team Chess Cruncher does, and that makes all the difference. And as Wesley So says, for the Lord Jesus, as I say, God bless. And I'll see you next time on Chess Cruncher TV. Have a blessed morning, afternoon, evening. Lord willing, I'll be back on tomorrow. And we'll keep pushing forward, moving onward and upward. And remember, this is really important. The Hannibal Smith quote is important. Even inside of a random what looks like a random position, there's always a plan. And if you know the imbalances inside that random position, you will have an advantage, and you'll be able to use that advantage and potentially go on to, in a losing position almost, be able to draw it, or in a winning position, basically get the one. And you'll get to say, I love it when a plan comes together. Okay, 2 thumbs up, hoorah, be blessed, and I will see you tomorrow. Go Team Chess Cruncher, hoorah. Bye-bye, team. Be blessed.